Today's episode of Rates and Barrels is brought to you by Topps.com and Topps Project 70. Topps is celebrating the 70th anniversary of its very first baseball card design with a new program that pushes boundaries while paying homage to their heritage. Project 70 has brought together creators of all kinds for this extraordinary set. Graphic designers, tattoo and graffiti artists, animators, illustrators, painters, and even a jeweler make up the artist roster, which includes names like Snoop Dogg, Action Bronson, Ben Baller, Jeff Staple, Tyson Beck, Alex Pardee, and more. Each artist will select their own MLB players and Topps designs from any year to craft a unique story. Ever want to know what Babe Ruth or Mickey Mantle would look like in a 1980s Topps design? Or how about Fernando Tatis Jr. in a classic template from the 1950s? Now you can. 3 new cards launch daily all year long on Topps.com and are only available for 70 hours before they're gone for good. And while you're there, be on the lookout for special cards. Head to Topps.com now to learn more about Project 70 and to check out which cards are live right now. Welcome to Rates and Barrels, presented by Topps. Check out Topps Project 70, celebrating 70 years of Topps baseball cards. Derek Van Riper here with Britt DVR and Eno Saris on this episode.
Please, it's Eno Baller from now on.
What?
I'm jealous of all those guys' names, man. On the Topps Project. Dude, some serious names on that list. Dude, Eno Baller. Love that. You think that's on his birth certificate?
Do you think it says Ben Baller on his gift certificate?
Yeah.
That would be pretty sweet.
It would be.
We were looking for a nickname for Britt a while back. I think we landed on Blaze Giroli. Is that what we kind of decided on? We never formally pushed that in, but that was the clubhouse leader, I think, at the time.
Yeah, I think so. I think even just like Blaze G just sounds pretty
nice.
Right? Giroli is just so long and complicated, and Blaze G, simple.
Or just
pronounce
G.
it wrong.
Kind of like
Just
G.
Just going down to one letter.
People do that to me all the time. I was E for a long time.
That's true. I'm B a lot. So yeah.
They don't call me D. I
well,
2 letters at least.
You're 3 letters.
Yeah.
You have to go. Well, you'd think you wouldn't have to go from 3 letters to 1, but then there's the people calling me E. So.
Actually, you know what? There is someone who calls me D, now that I think about it. Old family friend. I'm not sure why. It's really strange.
He thinks you're a dick.
Probably. most likely. That's the only explanation, right? It's like one of my dad's friends. He's known me since I was a little kid, so he knows.
We've already gone off the rails, and we haven't even gotten to the first item. Back to the rundown. Sorry.
Yeah, you know what? I'm not going to tell everybody what we're going to talk about. It's going to be a surprise as we go. Big surprises. Yeah, flying blind.
Blame me.
Well, we have 2 new prospects up for the Mariners. We saw the debuts of both Jared Kelenic and Logan Gilbert on Thursday night, and we talked about Kelenic and projections back on the Wednesday show. They let him off, which is pretty cool and kind of makes me excited about them just doing the simple right thing of maximizing his playing time as opposed to burying him in the bottom part of the order and making him earn a spot that's higher up.
Yeah, I think just having more plate appearances will be awesome. It shows a lot of faith in him, which is good. It won't be a deal where he starts hopefully dropping the lineup or not playing every day or whatever. They're putting him in and plugging and playing, basically. I also hope that this means maybe a little bit of patience for him. And I would say that, I don't know, the returns were a little bit mixed. I don't think he looked overmatched, but he did reach a fair amount, and I would like to see him kind of take to that leadoff role and be more patient because he's had different walk rates in the minors, so it's an open question of how patient he's going to be.
Yeah, I agree. He didn't look overmatched. He just looked like a rookie, very jittery. And I think it was his second at bat, guys, that second strike call, borderline. A veteran hitter probably gets that call, and then it kind of forced him to be aggressive and to chase pitches outside the zone. So I think, part of it's going to come with time. Part of it's just going to come with experience in the league, knowing the strike zone, getting those borderline calls. But I think there was a lot to like about it. If not for that spectacular play by Josh Naylor, he'd already have a hit. So I thought it was an encouraging night for a guy who, as Derek, I think, mentioned off air, makes Seattle infinitely more watchable than they were even a week ago, even a day ago.
That offense is pretty bad.
It's
They almost got no hit anyway.
For the second time in 8 days?
Yeah.
They're not great, but at least they're bad watchable. We've talked about this before on the show, right? They're entertaining. They're
Right.
I thought they both settled down a little bit. It is interesting to think about the jitters. Can you remember? I think you tweeted about the first day, your first interview, your first day in the clubhouse, and I'm thinking about just how, like, I still feel like a rookie a fair amount, like, because there's so many sort of unwritten rules, and you shouldn't do that, and you can't stand there, and all this stuff. I'll still find out, like, I'm not supposed to be here right now, and then COVID just made it worse. So you're like, I'm in the wrong place, I'm doing the wrong thing, but. Like, I just remember I was allowed to have a field pass as a blogger for the Mets. They had like a day where you could just be on the field. And I was asking players as they came out in the field to talk to me, and they all said no. And so the first, like, it was all rejection. Like, your first day was all like, no, 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 no. And I was like, oh God, this is going to be terrible. And then Lucas Duda said yes. And I was like, oh, okay, and I stumbled through some questions, and he's like a lovable guy, but pretty boring. But not a bad way to break in, I guess. At least a nice guy. You didn't give me great answers or anything, but like a nice guy that didn't take me to task. And I just remember being like, I like, you saw it a little bit in Logan Gilbert, right? Like the first couple of innings, I was like, "Oh, buddy, can I just give you a hug?"
I kind of felt like Gilbert was trying really hard to control his emotions. You'd see him walk off at the end of the inning, and his face, it was just kind of like, it was tightness, right? And he was trying to keep himself from getting too amped up, most likely. I imagine that's the feeling you get, right? You can see it. Kelenic's got a lot of movement in his swing and his stance anyway. Like when you watch him get in the box, like he's moving around quite a bit. Batting stance guy kind of nailed that, by the way. With Gilbert, I almost wondered if he was overthrowing a lot of his pitches early on too, because he's known for having good command, and his command did not look very good for most of that debut. And I wouldn't ever take a pitcher who shows shaky command in his debut and say, "Yep, that's it. That's the problem." I think this is a guy that's going to settle in fairly quickly. Both of these guys, I think they're up for good, barring some catastrophic failure. And I don't really see either one of them in their profiles having a lot of risk that would make me think that they're headed back to Tacoma anytime soon. I think this is going to be two long-term fixtures for this Mariners team. As far as the watchability index on the West Coast, Dodgers and Angels are kind of battling with the Padres for the top spot, right? Like the Padres are probably first. The Angels, because of Ohtani, maybe have passed the Dodgers. And then you've got like Seattle kind of in the
I love the Giants, and they're in first place or whatever, but I don't think that they're winning the watchability battle. I'm sorry, Giants fans. Just not when you've got all these stars. Like they're all kind of like 29 years old and okay.
Yeah.
But just the stuff and location plus numbers came through on Gilbert, just to pass those along. The slider, the harder breaking ball that he had, it was like kind of 84 and had like a little bit more sideways movement. That was his best pitch by stuff plus 110. His four-seam fastball was average. And the model really did not like that loopy curveball that he threw.
That's the one that Franmil Reyes hit out, right?
I think so. I think that's the one that Franmil hit. The one that was kind of like 75 to 77, 79 in there, and it went like more 12 to 6. That has like a 67 stuff plus. In terms of location plus, he did really well on the slider and the four-seam fastball, but also not so great on the knuckle curve. So, yeah, I think there could be some nerve action there where, I was a little surprised by some of the velo readings. Like, I know that he's added velo, but like he was sitting 97 and stuff. And I kind of feel like he's going to settle in maybe at 95 and maybe better command.
Yeah, the nerves are real. Britt, you've seen some debuts over the years. I mean, plenty of debuts, right? Do you see a pretty clear difference in the first start for a pitcher versus even just the second one?
Yeah, and you nailed it. The velocity tick up is a big one. These guys are like shaking. I've seen guys throw it to the backstop their first, like just they're that amped up. Especially pitchers, I think. Hitters, once you get that first at bat out of the way, I think it's a little bit easier to concentrate, maybe to like zone in. But if you're a pitcher, you're not used to the stadium. You're not used to everybody focusing on you. I mean, you guys have been to a minor league game. There's a huge difference between the crowd and the atmosphere. So
half the crowd at the minor league game is just there for like the food and like they're barely watching the game.
The beer line is longer a lot of times than like the picket line. So yeah, I do think that for pitchers it's a lot worse, but hitters certainly too. I think, had Kelenic gotten a hit, I think he would have been more relaxed, right? Those guys who get the first hit in their first at bat, it's like, oh, okay, it's off. Like, I can do this. Once you get your first one out of the way, guys talk about that all the time. Your first hit, your first home run, you're like, okay, I'm good. I'm here now. Because so many guys have that fear of, will it translate? Whether they actually tell you that they have that fear or not, they all kind of have that little fear in the back of their heads. So both these guys in Seattle are going to be fine. They're both legit. I expect Kelenic will get off this schneid here sooner rather than later, but I agree on the watchability. And honestly, unless Ohtani is pitching, I don't think the Angels are quite as watchable because their pitching is so bad. Yes, they have some much-watched players, but it's more like, let me flip to Mike Trout's at bat than let me watch 9 innings of an Angels game.
Yeah. I don't know. I struggle with that because when I look at the individual players, I think that their pitching is okay. Like Bundy, Ohtani, Haney, Cobb, like it seems like it's okay. And then even in the bullpen, it must be like their 5th starter, Quintana, and their 6th starter, like Sandoval or something.
Yeah.
And their middle relief. That must be what's been doing them in. I honestly think they should be better. This is like the 4th time in a row, year-wise, where I'm like, the Angels look okay. And then I'm like, why are they bad?
Well, Bundy, I think I saw some stats that said that like Bundy is a victim of a lot of bad luck too. Like his stats aren't terrible, like you said, but I think he's actually pitching a little bit better even than some of the stats would suggest. That's something I want to look into. I saw that recently. I want to forget exactly what it was, but he's definitely a guy who I agree. Like he was their opening day starter. Like he's their guy there, and he's pitching better than he ever did in Baltimore with less stuff. And I spoke to Dave Wallace, a longtime pitching coach and who was in Baltimore for a while. And he mentioned Gausman and Bundy and how guys kind of evolve. And I know we're going to talk about Jack Flaherty a little bit later in the show, but I think sometimes we get so caught up in the numbers that we also don't realize what goes between the ears and how big of a deal it is to just learn how to pitch at this level. And that's what Dylan Bundy has done. Not with the stuff he had in Baltimore, but he's a better pitcher now in Anaheim, I think, than he ever was.
Yeah, I think he has basically the same strikeout rate as last year, the same walk rate as last year, the same ERA estimators as last year. And last year he had a 3.3 ERA, and this year he has a 5 ERA. So I agree that there's some luck there. You could look at something like strand rate where, normally 70% of the people on base are stranded there, don't score. And for him, it's 60%. So there's definitely some luck stuff there. And I sometimes I like to like not look at the numbers and just be like, what do I think? Like, what do I think of this rotation? If you told me you had Bundy, Haney, and Ohtani as your top 3 and Cobb as your 4, I'd be like, you're probably okay. It's not like a league leading thing, but if your offense is good, and then if you tell me about the offense, you'd be like, I have Trout, I have Fletcher, who's like a contact god, I have Ohtani, I have Rendon, Upton. I'd be like, then you're probably okay. I would say that you're like. At least, I would say you're probably headed for like 86 wins.
I mean,
and
you look
instead,
at the teams,
they're 16-20.
Yeah, you look at the teams that are in last place right now: the Angels, the Tigers, the Orioles, the Nationals, the Pirates, and the Rockies. The Angels, and to a lesser degree, the Nats, the two you look at and go, they're probably not last place teams. The Nats could be. We've talked about their flaws a bit over the course of the season, but the Angels, I'd be shocked if they stayed in last place. Rendon's missed time with a couple of injuries. I think getting him back helps. One more great bat in the offense.
It definitely seemed better than the Rangers and Mariners. Right?
Easily. Easily. Like the Angels to me were a sleeper to win the division. Like that wasn't an outlandish prediction going into the season. So I would still hold out some hope. They're only 4 below 500 in the middle of May. It's not as bad as like the Twins situation. They're 11 below 500 now after losing to the White Sox on Thursday. I mean, that's a bad situation.
And they have an actual I don't know if it's like a in stone flaw, but like their pitching is a problem.
Their inherited runners are a problem too. Like their inherited runners are off the chain bad. And Levine the other day was going on Twins radio, and my friend Derek Wetmore does a great job with that. And he kind of pointed to how they're unlucky in a lot of facets. But what I took away from that was even if they were lucky, if you reverse some of those like unlucky trends, they're a 500 team. That's still a massive undersell. This team was built to win the division, right? I picked them to win the division, if not finish second. taking the luck factors out and saying, yay, we'd be 500. Like, that's still not good. That's not anything
And I
to hang
thi-
your hat on.
And I actually think there's stuff to look back on and be like, oops, you should have spent more money on pitching. Like, oops.
Yeah.
Because look at this. By WAR, they are 29th. Oh, my bold prediction that the Chicago Cubs would not be worse than their division for pitching is even worse than I thought. The Cubs are 30th.
Oh, no.
Stay hot.
The bet on non-velocity stuff not looking
Well, that's
good
the whole.
6
Let me
weeks
see.
in.
Let me see. Does it get any better if I just do starters? No, they're last. Their replacement level is starters. They have 0 WAR. Okay, yeah, let's move on.
Yeah, I mean, it's brutal. I think with the Twins, Barrios has pitched well. Happ hasn't. Pineda's been actually lucky, giving up home runs, missing bats, and keeping the walk rate kind of close to his career norms, but has a legit home run problem that has not surfaced in the actual results yet. So his ratios could be going the other way. We've talked about Maeda on this show. Massive home run issues, K rate down, but I think
stuff is still there.
I think he gets back to being high 3s, low 4s ERA Kenta Maeda. I don't think he goes back to being 2020 Kenta Maeda because he couldn't get back to that level. It's almost impossible to do that over a full season. So they're not totally screwed, but they're definitely in trouble. And I would look at them as a team that has to get on a really nice run sooner rather than later if they're going to start justifying making improvements to this roster once we get to the deadline in a couple of months.
I would feel so much better about them if like Jordan Balazlovich or like one of these young pitchers they had was like, top 3 pitching prospect-esque and like was ready to step in. Because when I do that thing where I'm not looking at the stats and I say, okay, Barrios, Maeda, Pineda, Happ.
Yeah, you're making a very uncomfortable face right now.
Yeah. I almost take the Angels rotation over that. Barrios a little bit better on the front end. What?
I think you should write a not stats article because I think it'd be very un-Eno-esque.
Yeah, sometimes I just go with my gut.
Yep. Yeah, sometimes you do. We had a question come in about Luis Castillo. So he kind of fits into this underperformers to worry about. He had to start at Coors on Thursday night. That's usually not a place where a pitcher off to a slow start is going to get well. And yes, the bad start for Luis Castillo got worse. The question specifically that came in from Ryan, there were actually 2, is the Command Plus score on his fastball and slider worse than last season? And if it's a mechanical issue for Castillo, is it something that you think can be fixed mid-season? When we previously discussed him on the show, it was because the velocity was down early in the year, but opening day in Cincinnati was like 42 degrees. So hardly optimal conditions for a hard-throwing starter like Castillo. Now that we've had a little more time to look at him, are you starting to see legitimate drops in the Command Plus numbers?
Not really. The four-seam fastball is average, and every other pitch is above average by Command Plus. I do think that stuff has been the issue, and yesterday's 70-degree start at Coors was the warmest start that he's pitched in. So if you look at his stuff numbers, they were actually rising until the last 2 starts. So I still have some hope for him. I don't know that I call him in like an unqualified buy low, but if you just look at his pitches separately, the changeup is still above average. The location is still good on all 4 of his pitches. The slider is still around average. And if he can just get that fastball velocity back up, I think he has a chance to be good again.
Interesting. I, too, do my best work in 70 degrees.
I've come to really appreciate the low 60s. I think a 62-degree day is just about perfect because then you get to evening, you get to have a nice fire outside in the backyard, throw on a sweatshirt. I stay comfortable all day. I can run at 62 degrees and not feel disgusting. I don't know. That's my optimal temperature since everybody's asking and sharing optimal running temperatures. Got a question that came in about Jack Flaherty. This one's interesting just because people have always kind of said, is Jack Flaherty really an ace? And Steve writes, Flaherty seems to outperform his stuff and command numbers. Any idea why? My first thought is, we were just talking about this with some of the Angels pitchers, Dylan Bundy being a bit unlucky. sometimes we get fixated on the ERA indicators, the fielding independent pitching metrics, which are good in terms of distilling a pitcher's actual skills. However, baseball is not a fielding independent game. There is a defense that plays behind Jack Flaherty, and that defense happens to be very good. It's been pretty much a top 5 defense for his entire career. So I would say if you have a guy who is consistently pitching in front of a defense that's that good, you are setting yourself up at least with one possible path to outperform a bunch of different metrics.
What about the Yadier Molina factor too? I don't think people realize when you have a catcher, not saying he can turn everybody into an ace, but I do think he can help separate. I do think he can help guys, he can get borderline calls. I think there's a lot of trust there. I think you can't quantify with numbers everything that a guy like Molina brings to that staff. And also having a guy like Wainwright on staff who speaks his mind, never doesn't speak his mind, is a guy who wants the ball no matter what. We can all admit that his best days are behind him as a pitcher. However, he's still got that bulldog mentality. He reminds me a lot of Max Scherzer. And I think for Flaherty, having the defense, as you mentioned, having Molina, and then just having it between the ears, as we talked about earlier in the show, it's one thing to have the stuff. And we've seen cases like this before where guys seem to have it all. They're can't miss guys, and they can't put it together at the big league level. So as much as we can quantify things, we still can't really quantify guys who just know how to pitch. And I think Jack Flaherty's one of those guys.
Yeah, I agree. And also the park, it's like he's in a very comfortable situation. That home park is probably like almost tied now with San Francisco after the changes as being the most pitcher friendly. So, he's the kind of character, he kind of reminds me of Patrick Corbin, where like when he's in the situation, I like him, but I wouldn't necessarily pony up a ton of money to take him out of that situation. As a free agent, because then he loses Yadier, then he loses the home park, and now you're getting a fastball slider guy with on the tail end of how good the fastball is. The other thing that comes to mind is he has an excellent slider and an excellent fastball. The command plus is good on both of them on those 2 pitches, and the stuff plus is very good on the slider. So I think that is actually very important for a modern pitcher, to have a very good slider. That's one of the things I'm taking away from Gilbert is he has good command and a good slider. And at least he has that, that's, I think, the foundation almost for any pitcher. And if you look at any pitcher that has 2 pitches and is overperforming, Huascar Ynoa, even Michael Pineda, I think there's a lot of examples. Even Kenta Maeda, yes, he has a lot of pitches, but he has a slider. His slider is his best pitch, and it's his best pitch by stuff and command. And how did he break out? He just started throwing the slider a ton. So I think this is a slider league, and Jack Flaherty is one of the best sliders in the big leagues. And so that's almost all the story you have to tell. And I know that, if you look at some ERA estimators, or you look at strikeouts minus walks, you could be like, hey, he's not this good. I think he's a low 3s guy. He might have a couple bad starts in him, but I think this is who he is.
So you guys would both agree that you expect him to continue outperforming the ERA indicators for all these different factors. Yachty, the defense behind him, the park. This is a sustainable, beats the advanced number sort of guy with the skills that he has and with those factors that we're talking about.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think this is a case of a rookie having this crazy stretch that we know is going to somehow kind of fade. I like Jack Flaherty. I think what Eno said, he's not this super impressive guy. I wouldn't draft him as an ace to build around on a team, but he's a guy who I'd like among my 25. I think he's a good clubhouse guy. He's a guy who speaks his mind. I think he's got a good presence. So yeah, I think it'll probably continue. Maybe not at this rate, but I think he'll continue to outperform some of his stats.
Well, we got almost 500 innings, and he's got a 3.27 ERA. That's I'm feeling pretty good about that sort of where he is.
Yeah, so a really good 2 if he doesn't meet your qualifications for what constitutes an ace. I think at this point, very sustainable skills and another good start to the season here for Jack Flaherty. Dinner time can be chaotic, but with Freshly, it's easy. The chefs take care of your meals a few nights a week and take the pressure off you. Freshly offers chef-made, nutrient-packed, delicious meals delivered fresh to your door. No cooking required. Grocery shopping and cooking can be a pain, especially right now. And with Freshly, you don't have to do it. Your meals arrive cooked and fresh every week, so you can keep your fridge stocked and skip the trip to the store. Ordering is easy. Visit Freshly.com and choose from over 30 delicious, satisfying, better-for-you meals like steak peppercorn, sausage baked penne, or their chicken pesto bowl. Freshly can fit your lifestyle with a variety of plans and meals to pick from that work for your dietary needs, preferences, tastes, and family size. Right now, Freshly is offering our listeners $40 off your first 2 orders when you go to Freshly.com/rates. Stop stressing about dinner. Go to Freshly.com/rates for $40 off your first 2 orders. That's Freshly.com/rates to get $40 off your first 2 orders. Look, no one's perfect. Even the best baseball players strike out with the bases loaded. The best golfers sometimes 3-putt with the tournament on the line. So if you feel like you come up short in the bedroom sometimes, it's perfectly okay. And if it's bothering you, there are options. Go to GetRoman.com/rates now. With Roman, you can get a free online evaluation and ongoing care for ED, all from the comfort and privacy of your home. A U.S. licensed healthcare professional will work with you to find the best treatment plan. If medication is appropriate, it ships to you free with 2-day shipping. The whole process is straightforward and discreet. Getting started is simple. Just go to GetRoman.com/rates and complete an online visit. Take care of your ED without leaving home. Complete an online visit today to connect with a doctor and take care of it. Go to GetRoman.com/rates now to get $15 off your first month. Look, there's a straightforward way to take care of your ED. GetRoman.com/rates. Get started now to save $15 on your first month of treatment. All right, if you've been watching baseball Twitter at all and reading The Athletic in recent days, you might be surprised to see that there are members of the Yankees, both on the coaching staff and actual members of the team, missing time due to COVID. And it's particularly confusing because this is a team that reached that 85% threshold for reduced restrictions going forward. And it's led to a whole mess of different questions. Lindsay Adler did a great job breaking it all down, explaining who's been impacted, how they think this happened, what's going to happen next. The Yankees have kind of said publicly, like, we're a case study right now. We're trying to figure out what's going on just like everybody else. So, Britt, how surprised were you to see this, knowing what you know about how teams gather, how they operate, how the restrictions have been changed, and did you expect something along these lines to occur, even with a vaccinated team, or did this catch you as off guard as it caught me?
Yeah, I was shocked, and I hope it doesn't ruin it in terms of rules being relaxed, because we need to get there. We are still on Zoom only. The CDC has said that you can wear no masks if you're vaccinated, indoors or outdoors, yet the reporters were still not allowed near players. So my first thought was, oh God, we're never going to get on a field again. But I think when you look at it closely and you see like some of the threads from people way smarter than me who deal with this stuff, you realize that this was going to happen at some point. It's just baseball is set up perfectly for it to happen because, if somebody gets it, they're all stuck in these little rooms. I think I saw somewhere that there was a rain delay. So the coaches would have all been gathered inside in this room during a rain delay. Like, okay, now I can see how it happened. But for me, it doesn't change how I feel about being vaccinated and moving forward. I don't know about you guys, but that's how I feel.
Yeah, I think this is actually really awkward, I think, because, I think a lot of us are going to get it. I think that after we get vaccinated, if we got tested every day, like baseball players, a lot of us would be surprised, be like, what? I'm vaccinated. I have it. And I think the idea for the most part is, like I was telling my kids today on the walk, it's like your body is practicing, right, for the next time it gets this, right? And so the next time it gets this, it's like, oh yeah, we got the plays already. We know how to deal with this. And so I think it's actually okay. This New York thing is not that devastating to me because all of them but one were asymptomatic. And so what you're saying is that probably the one that was symptomatic did give it to the rest of them, right? Because you need to be symptomatic on some level. You need to have a viral load in order to sort of give it to other people. And so what you're finding out is, like, if you are symptomatic after you've been vaccinated, then you should put a mask on and then you should go get tested. But if you're not symptomatic, we're only going to know about the baseball players because they get tested every day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's kind of awkward because I think if those people were in real life, 7 of the 8 of them would still be at work and it'd be okay. They wouldn't be passing it on to other people and they would be living life. But because we're kind of like still have the old rules in place, they have to stop playing baseball and stop coaching. And they have to do it for 10 days, even though they're probably not going to spread it to anybody. So this is, and I'm not trying. There might be somebody who's mad at me already for saying the things I've said. I think this is just going to be, it's just indicative of how difficult it will be to open up. And I have sympathy for anybody who is mad that the CDC said that we could take masks off if we're vaccinated. I understand that it's going to be tough because you don't know that everybody's vaccinated, and people who are not vaccinated are going to take their masks off. And that sucks. But mostly, if you're vaccinated, you're like the likelihood you go to the hospital from this is very, very low, like extremely tiny. And I do think there is an impetus on us to open up and to go back to something normal-ish. So I don't know. I think that this is just a microcosm of what we're going to be dealing with everywhere as we try to open up. We try to be, post-vaccinated society.
Yeah, it's just there will be some setbacks along the way. I think the thread that Zach Binney, who has been quoted in a few pieces on The Athletic, his thread kind of explaining what happened and what it really means, I think that helped put my mind at ease a little bit. I mean, you have to consider that for the most part, it worked the way it was supposed to. And Gleyber Torres is just such a strange case because he had the virus and was fully vaccinated, and now he's unavailable, at least for a little while. It seems like they're a little unclear about the full scope of a positive test at this point and whether or not a player has to be out for 10 days. That's still pending. It's the kind of thing that the league at some point will figure out, okay, actually a couple negative tests in this situation, it's safe for a player to return. Like, there's still some of this that is being learned as we go because the science has moved so fast throughout this entire process, and this is our first pandemic like this that has changed everything about day-to-day life for us that any of us have really ever dealt with.
Yeah, there is some leeway in the rules for the commissioner to kind of make a decision. And I wonder if that leeway will allow him to consider how symptomatic a player is, for example, and consider that if they're vaccinated and asymptomatic, perhaps they're allowed to get back on the field quicker.
Yeah, so hopefully things are headed in the right direction. I believe I saw on Thursday it was the first day with no new positive test for the Yankees, so it does seem like things are trending back in the right direction.
And you remember back to when like the Marlins, like the first time when everything was going bad, remember how bad that felt? Where like the Marlins, and we were like, baseball's done. Do you remember getting texts from people? Like, did you get any of these texts, Britt? I got texts from like AGMs and stuff where they were like, yeah, we're done. Like this is over. And there were like 3 or 4 games that were canceled in one slate one day.
Yep.
And that's when everyone's like, God, we're done. And I really do think that if like one more team had a breakout, we might have had like at least like a 2 or 3 week, everyone stopped playing baseball. But we kind of got through it. And I kind of think that this is the new version of that, where we're going to have a couple breakouts like this where they're vaccinated, but asymptomatic, and we're just going to have to figure out how to get through it.
Yeah, I remember those early season Fridays from last year when we were doing this pod. It just felt like the sky was falling each week a little bit more, and while this is a setback, it seems like a relatively small one based on the outcomes that we've seen to this point. Britt, you wrote up a kind of a notebook piece that had a few interesting things in it this week, and the Astros did something good. And one thing we've talked about a lot on this show.
Don't sound surprised.
Yeah, well, you got to get credit for if you do something good, it should be recognized as something good. So the Astros have actually covered the cost of housing, provided housing for their minor leaguers, which people listening might be saying, wait, that's not covered? And if you think about a minor leaguer possibly being promoted multiple times in a year and the logistics of having a place to live. Usually you're going to live with roommates, multiple other players, probably more players than you should have in a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment. It's a logistical headache that most of us don't wrap our heads around, especially for guys that are making, a few $100s a week in some cases. So what do you think led the Astros to go ahead and do this? Because this is pretty unprecedented.
Yeah, so here's the crazy thing, guys. It was really hard to confirm this because I don't think the Astros wanted people to know. It's this positive thing, and they didn't want to comment on it. Reached a few people. It took me I heard about this from other minor leaguers because they were like,
They were
hey,
jealous.
did you see what's going on in Houston? And for a while, nobody in Houston would tell me if it was true. And I'm like, well, I can't run with this unless somebody actually tells me. It doesn't matter
that means they think it's it's an advantage. It's not something they're doing out of the goodness of their hearts. They think this is like a tactical advantage.
I think so. And then I also wonder, is ownership or the front office worried that other teams are going to be mad at them because now they're pressured to do the right thing, right? So
you curve breakers.
Yeah, maybe that was another thing too. Like, how dare you pay for these guys to live in furnished apartments? Like, they need to slum it. But the problem is, as you mentioned, Derek, so with COVID this year, you can't have like 6 guys in a 1 bedroom. Like, I talked to a lot of different guys, and most of them have one person that's in their pod that they room with on the road that they're allowed to live with at home. And so that's it. If you have a family, if you have a wife, guess what? They cannot stay with you in your hotel, in your pod on the road. So the whole situation isn't great. Finally, yesterday, they relaxed the rules. Same thing as the big leagues. They relaxed the rules for vaccinated minor league players. But I hope this becomes the norm, because if you can furnish an apartment for them and take away having to find a lease, having to break a lease, which ruins your credit score when you go up and down or you get hurt,
traded,
you get demoted, traded, like there's all these things that play into it. So having the security of, okay, I know where I'm living and I can use the money I make for food and utilities, training and my family and other things, because they only get paid 5 months out of the year also. So getting these teams to pay for the lodging for really this year is 4 months, right? It's one month less, even though they're getting paid that month still this year. So
yeah, it's not as amazing as it sounds at first. It's not 12. Yeah. It's not 12 months.
So I hope other teams do feel pressured to do this, because I think it should be the bare minimum. You got rid of 40 affiliates. Yes, you're paying them a little bit more, but I bet the money equals out because you got rid of 40 affiliates. So there's a lot less players. So I hope this becomes something that we're not like, yay, Astros. And it's great. It's great PR. It's great. It's awesome the Astros are doing it. I hope every team does it, though. And they're like, wait, why aren't we doing this too? It's so simple.
Yeah, it's just one more really kind of significant pressure you're putting on every one of your minor league players that they don't need. If you think about it from even just a cynical point of view, which I'm not always trying to go the cynical route, but if you just want your players to perform better and to get good rest and not be constantly stressed about money and logistics, this is one way to do that. And this is one way to increase player performance. This is one way to make happier people, happier employees in this case. So it seems like a relatively small thing. Obviously, teams can afford to pull this off, but so much more control. I think this is kind of back to the way minor league players eat too, right? If you owned a team, wouldn't you want everybody who was in your organization to eat good, healthy meals every day? Wouldn't you want to invest in that? It's kind of the same sort of thing where it's just like, hey, look, you're a member of our organization. We can take care of you. We will take care of you because we want you to thrive. We want to make you as healthy and productive as you can possibly be. And it's the same as with minor league travel not being fun at all, like the long bus rides. And one of the few silver linings about the minor league shrinking and some of the changes they made to the schedule, it is less rigorous travel compared to what we're used to, having longer series before you jump back on the bus and head to the next town. So small steps, baby steps in the right direction. And yeah, my best guess as to why the Astros wouldn't want anyone to know, there's actually 2. One, they don't intend to do this forever, so they didn't want it to be known that they're taking it away if they were going to take it away later. Or 2, they see it and they're like, actually, we found that when our players sleep and don't worry about these things, that they're more productive, and then we can get them through the minor leagues faster, or we can trade them because their performance is better, and it's good for us that way.
They are a super tech and data savvy team. They have these things called Ura. I don't even know how to say it. I've just seen it. These like rings. You know what I'm talking about, Britt? Have you seen them wear these rings? They're these rings that track your sleep schedule.
Okay, so they're like whoops.
What's it called?
It's like a Whoop band. Is the same.
Yeah. There's Whoop, and then there's like an Oura is like a ring, and it'll track your sleep schedule, your heart rate, and certain stuff, and download it to an app. And if they were doing that, in some sort of rigorous way, and then realize, oh, the guys who have who live like 6 in a pod or whatever, they're all like sleep deprived, and all the guys who had the like 600, the big, the 600,000 or $1 million signing bonuses, and have like an apartment. They all have way better sleep cycle numbers. There could have been sort of a data way into this. They could have actually sort of spotted something and just been like, oh yeah, this makes a lot of sense. And a lot of times these things pay for themselves. If you think about it, like having a cost controlled reliever for the first like 3 years of his deal, right? He costs $1.5 million. Imagine you created one Edwin Diaz out of this. Like imagine that like somebody who was like sleeping poorly and just wasn't any good and just fell out of the organization and never went anywhere, versus that guy slept well and ended up as an Edwin Diaz, right? That is enough to pay for all of the housing. Just finding one Edwin Diaz is enough to pay for all of the housing for all of the other guys for all of the years that Edwin Diaz was in the minor leagues. So if you run some numbers and you think that doing this will create at least one player, then it's going to be worth all the numbers.
Yeah. So motivation, aside, just if there's a reason for teams to do this, I actually don't even care what it is, because it seems like something that would really help players a lot. So kudos to the Astros, things I did not think I would be saying, words that I didn't think I would put together for a very long time. The Manscaped engineering team has confirmed that they have successfully created the Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, which is now available for purchase in the U.S. and Canada. Join over 2 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with this exclusive offer for you. 20% off and free worldwide shipping with the code RATES at manscaped.com. What makes this trimmer different than all other trimmers? How about a new multi-function on-off switch that can engage a travel lock, created for people who like to travel? The optimized Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer is also waterproof, so you can groom in the shower and make cleanup easy. And did I mention wireless charging? The Lawnmower 4.0's new wireless charging system uses electromagnetic induction, which can help battery length last longer. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code RATES at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com and use code RATES. Unlock your confidence and always use the right tools for the job with Manscaped. Small businesses are grappling with the impact of these uncertain times and looking for resources. And that's why, for the second year in a row, Dell Technologies is assembling an all-star lineup of podcasters to create the first ever virtual conference to share advice and inspiration for small businesses of all kinds. Dell Technologies is here to help safeguard your business with modern devices and Windows 10 Pro, and to provide relevant content for your business's success. Search Dell Technologies Small Business Podference on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or Odyssey.com. All right. We had an email come in from loyal listener OJ, and as I mentioned earlier, it was titled, well, he said in the first line, he has a quarrel with us. Loves the show, so yeah, I'm glad we're...
Actually, I think I do have the answer for the what happens with a quarrel.
How do you end a quarrel?
A duel.
Oh, jeez. I hope it doesn't come to that. Hopefully we can diffuse the situation before it actually becomes pistols at dawn with OJ, because I think OJ's emails are insightful. I think he's a consistent supporter of the show, so I would really hate to end up in a duel situation with him, really with anyone, but with OJ specifically.
You have besmirched my name, OJ. There's only one way out of this.
Things are escalating real quickly around here. So the email reads as follows. As I mentioned, it started with a compliment. As always, I enjoy your podcast immensely, but I do have a quarrel. First, you guys seem pretty harsh about the Angels cutting Albert Pujols, even though he has something like a negative WAR over the last 6 years. I get that it could have been done differently, but it seems like the elephant in the room is that guys will justifiably try to squeeze every day they can out of those contracts that strangle teams who shouldn't have offered them to begin with. Everyone has also buried the Red Sox for not signing Mookie and Cleveland for not signing Francisco Lindor to similarly awful deals. Suppose we give Mookie the benefit of the doubt and say he's going to stay as productive as Joe Morgan, a similar-ish player, but one who stayed at second base. We'll even give Mookie that renaissance year that Morgan had in 1982. Are the first few great years enough to justify paying Mookie so much during the extended decline? And does it make any sense to pay Lindor for that twilight when he's an average 4 WAR player for this early part of his career? Just curious how much you guys think a team should pay for the good, knowing that they're on the hook for a whole lot of bad. He also offered up Nomar Garciaparra as a potential Francisco Lindor comp. So I think our beef, just to, again, try to diffuse the situation and avoid pistols at dawn, I think our biggest beef wasn't that they got rid of Pujols. It was that they didn't have an obvious upgrade for their lineup to call up at the time that they did it, right? A healthy Brandon Marsh or the promotion of Joe Adell, I think all three of us would say that probably makes them immediately better. But when you call up John Jay, and no disrespect to John Jay, you're not making your team better. So the timing was just really bizarre from that regard. But I think we all agree, though, that it was time for Pujols, relatively speaking, to go. They didn't need to keep him around if they were going to contend.
Yeah, and I think my beef is a little bit about giving the player room for like celebration, and sort of allowing him to do the kind of go gently into the night tour that we've seen from other players. I mean, I guess this is where COVID might have been a problem here, because I think the best case scenario would be sometime in September last year. Let's say we all had fans at every stadium, then telling him, we're not re-upping you next year. Like, we're going to DFA you in the offseason. But we're going to tell you now so that we can, if you're cool with it, we can do a bunch of celebration stuff. We can have Albert Pujols night at the park the last night of the season, and you can have, and we'll talk to other PR departments. And if maybe we're in St. Louis in a week, we can do a thing in St. Louis, that sort of deal. And because of COVID, you couldn't really do that same thing. So maybe they should have done that 2 years ago. It would have been okay. Like in 2019, it might have been all right to say, we're going to DFA you in the offseason. That's how bad he's been. It's like 2-3 years running. They could have said this and could have set it up differently. So that's been my main thing. It's not getting rid of him. And then to the larger point about players, I think if you get 6, 7, 8 wins, like if you get like 6 wins or 7 wins out of a player in the first few years, then it is worth it. Because not only does that change how they age, it means that you get an all-star, you get a superstar, and that is worth everything because you only have 25 or 26 roster slots. So if you can fit 6 wins into a spot there, that is so much better than having 3 2-win guys, and that means a lot more to like the Dodgers and the Yankees and like the Mets, the team the Mets thought they were building, which is like, we need a star here because we can get lots of 2 and 3 win players. We have lots of those, but we really need a 6-win player. And so we're going to pay up front. And if he gets 6 wins, aging says it'll age and he'll still be an average player at the end. I think that's what they thought they were getting. And maybe Lindor's only a 3 to 4 win player, in which case that deal will turn out to be pretty poor. But I don't think the Mookie deal is looking as bad.
Damn, don't quarrel with Eno. That's good.
No, I agree with a lot of his points. I mean, which of the deals, like, do you think the Betts or Lindor deals were like, did they stick out right away to you, Britt? Or like, do I think either of them are bad now from the team perspective?
No, and Pujols deal is an old regime deal. It's like the A-Rod deal. Like we used to pay people based off of past performance, and clubs knew those last few years would be painful. Same thing with Miguel Cabrera. When you sign those deals, they're going to be painful in the end. That's kind of the old regime.
Those were older. Yeah, there were older players too, less dynamic players. They, like 32. I think they were 32 and 33 when they signed these long-term deals. Bad idea.
Yeah, and you were paying for past performance too, and that's something that needs to be obliterated in baseball. You're either going to pay them more when they're under arbitration, right? You're going to pay them more when they're good, or you're going to pay them for their past. Like you can't have it both ways, right? We can't decide, hey, we're going to stop paying guys because past 35 they're done. right? We're going to stop these contracts here. Well, okay, but
and we're also only going to pay them $500,000 when they get to the major leagues, and they're really good.
Yeah. So you have this tiny window as a player, and I think that's what's creating a lot of the issues with the union and the league now. Is okay, if you want to pay these guys, but these guys used to be told cash in when you become a free agent, right off into the sunset, right? You can play till you're 38. You won't be very good the last few years, but it's okay because you are underpaid the first 5 years. But it doesn't make sense anymore, and that's why you look at a deal like Pujols, and you have to remember that was an old regime contract. Those just don't happen anymore. Nobody does that anymore.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think Lindor, the hope is he gets it back on track. He's young enough. He's not, and he's very different than Pujols. He's like, he's a shortstop, so he can play third. There's a lot of places, a lot of sort of bumps along the ugly tree that he can go down.
The ugly tree, very nice. The thing we didn't see back at the time of Pujols' deal and similar contracts of that era, the closest thing we saw to it was the Evan Longoria contract, which is nothing compared to what Tatis just got from the Padres a few months back. And I think when the Tatis deal happened, if I remember correctly, we said it's possible that he ends up being underpaid for the actual production that he provides the Padres over the life of the deal. It's actually very possible that he
was the youngest, most dynamic. Well, I don't know if most dynamic. Betts and Lindor are pretty dynamic, but at the time of the signing of the deal, the youngest and most dynamic.
Right, but you're still taking considerable risk with anyone on a 14-year contract at $340 million. So I think if this is the new adjustment, if we're no longer going to pay players for who they used to be on long-term deals, and instead we're going to maybe slightly underpay superstars, and that slight underpay is still $25 million AAV, and that's going to keep going up over time, that's a better place to be if those are my only two options, because you don't have these awkward endings, you don't have these frustrations that develop for players who were great. I think that was the saddest thing for me with Pujols, was that people really started to just resent what he got as a contract when he deserved it years before he actually got it. That was always the problem. So hopefully we have diffused the quarrel with OJ.
Well, it is awkward though, because if you look at Miguel Cabrera, for the life of it, for his baseball life, he's produced value equal to his pay. Right.
And Pujols, I think, is above that. I think Pujols actually produced more value than he was actually paid over time.
But the shape of it makes us think so differently about it.
Mm-hmm. So it all comes back to getting the CBA right and getting players paid a lot earlier. I had not thought about Nomar as a comp for Lindor, but
the injury aspect and the power outage a little bit.
I just think so much of our current view of Lindor is skewed by 6 slow weeks with his new team and not what we've seen from him since he broke into the league in 2015. Look at the last 6 years instead of the last 6 weeks, and I think you feel quite a bit better about that long-term deal.
And power is the thing you know least about in small samples. And right now, he's got a top 10 strikeout rate in baseball. So if he does bring the power back, he could have a great year. It's just, the power's missing right now.
All right. Well, thanks for the email, OJ. If you'd like to send us an email, ratesandbarrels@theathletic.com is the best way to do that. On Twitter, you can find Britt at Britt_Giroli. He is at Enoceris. I am at Derek Van Riper. If you don't have a subscription to The Athletic, you should get one. theathletic.com/ratesandbarrels, $3.99 a month gets you in the door. Hope everybody has a great weekend. Rates and Barrels is back on Monday.
Thanks for listening.